Hello, I'm Larry Lee with Brownfield Ag News Network. Richard Gupton joins us. He is the Senior Vice President of Public Policy for the Ag Retailers Association. Hello, Richard.
Hey, great to be here.
The big railroad merger seems to be the talk around many industries, especially agriculture. This is something that you're a little apprehensive about. I understand the association does not support the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern merger.
That's right. We're worried major impact it could have on America's agricultural industry, on rural communities, and the kind of service or potential lack of service that could happen because of this merger. It'll be the first coast-to-coast merger with these two railroads if it's allowed to move forward. And my understanding is I think they would control nearly 50% of rail service with this merger. Right now, the big four control around 90% or over 90%. And so it is concerning with that kind of power. We're not sure how that really enhances competition when you have less railroads competing against each other. And it's really not a competition with trucking if they try to claim that. They're really apples and oranges, and a lot of fertilizer movement, particularly, and other ag commodities like grain, heavily rely on the movement from the rail system.
You mentioned it's an apples and oranges comparison with trucks, which mainly is because anyone can use the highway system, but the railroads own the rails. So really, if you're a rail customer, you are captivated by that one owner of the railroad, aren't you?
That's right. And our members are in rural communities servicing farmers in the heavy parts of ag. And they usually only have the one railroad that they have to try to negotiate with. So it's called a captive shipper when you're dealing with these railroads. So they've got a lot of leverage. The shippers typically do not. We've advocated over the years to have more shippers' rights in dealing with the railroads. And the Surface Transportation Board is the agency overseeing this. And so we participate in hearings on issues. And just for example, and I've been at ARA for nearly 23 years, and we've had railroad services. I've gotten calls from members saying, hey, they're trying to shut down our service to our retail facility. And so we've had asked the Surface Transportation Board to kind of help mitigate that and make sure that didn't take place. We've had members, and this is like multiple railroads that this has occurred, including one example in the Midwest. We had a member where the railroad asked them to spend millions of dollars to upgrade their rail spur to their facility, and then like a year later they're saying they were going to try to cut off service to that facility. So we're very worried about this merger and what could happen moving forward, and the lack of potential service that's really necessary for our retail facilities and for their farmers, the impact on just-in-time delivery of product, and the whole rural communities in general.
That's an important point you bring up about how the businesses often have to invest in the rail spurs. I've always wondered why the railroad would charge the business if they're already charging for the service. You'd think the railroad would want that spur just so they could get the business.
You would think that, right? But to them, it's a volume business. And for some of these communities and retail locations, the volume is not big enough for them. And so that's why they've tried to shut off service. They've increased rates. For example, over a 20-year period, Anheuser-Ammonia, the rates have gone up nearly 200% through rail service. And it takes, talking about trucks and railroads, it takes 4 trucks to one rail car to move Anheuser-Ammonia, which is an essential fertilizer product, particularly in the Midwest, Pacific Northwest. And that's above and beyond just the general rate increases that they've had of rail services. It's a bigger impact on the ag space, and it's significantly higher than on the trucking side too when you're looking at overall rates.
Another thing to think about is how we've seen many more rail lines get abandoned over the last 25, 30 years or so. That means you're trucking it to a rail facility, so now you've increased that cost of transportation.
That's right. And look at what we're dealing with now with higher fuel costs, so less drivers as well to try to move products. And again, our industry is supply chain dependent for those deliveries. And so when you're relying on these trucks, higher costs. It impacts the costs on farmers. We've had situations with the railroads where they've held back deliveries, and so when our members are counting on deliveries in a timely way, they've done they've held them back, what they call bunching, and then brought like 20 cars at once. And so you're having a retail site having to go through those and unload those when they don't have the personnel in a timely way, and do it within a 24-hour period, and then the railroads come back and try to charge you because they haven't unloaded it quickly enough. And so all of those things have a big impact on our members and farmers to make sure they get product just when they need it. And it's all the weather dependent business, that's kind of a critical impact on our members and the ag in general.
Help me understand this one. With rail rates going up by more than 40% over the past 20 years, why is anhydrous so much more of an increase at 200% since the mid-2000s?
That's the rate I gave you. The 40% is just overall, like all industries. But for fertilizer, it is much higher, 200% increase. And the reason is they're trying to get out of handling anhydrous ammonia or hauling anhydrous ammonia and push it towards the highways and trucks. But again, that makes it less safe because it takes 4 trucks to every railroad. And the whole system, particularly if you look at the Midwest, the pipeline systems, the rail systems, storage systems for that particular product has all been built around that system of movement by rail. And they know, again, these are captive shippers that they can basically try to charge what they want. We've tried to get help through the Surface Transportation Board, through members of Congress. There is a legislation that Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, and Roger Marshall, Republican of Kansas, have that would better define what's called their common carry obligations for dealing with products like anhydrous ammonia. And so we're supportive of that, trying to get more teeth to the Surface Transportation Board regulations through that legislation.
As you look back, there have been other railroad mergers, and what kind of feedback have your members given you after those mergers? Service has gotten worse, hasn't it?
It's gotten a lot worse. And I don't know if you recall, over the years, and there was a lot of problems during the last time the UP was involved in a major merger, going back a ways here. And if you recall, this goes back several years, but they tried to implement this precision scheduled railroading, to try to make things more efficient. But what ended up happening, at least for the ag space and fertilizers, there was less shipments and less reliability, and again, supply chain issues. So we're very concerned about this potential merger. It doesn't enhance competition as far as what the regulatory requirements require the Surface Transportation Board to look at. And we're part of a coalition called the Stop the Rail Merger Coalition. Darren Kopic, our ARA's president and CEO, recently put out an opinion piece, an op-ed, that's available on our website as well, laying out all the points and more of what we've talked about right now on why this is a bad thing for rural America and for the ag industry.
Have your members also expressed concern about having to either move locations or change their business model just to get next to a main line because the railroads aren't servicing the less traveled spur lines anymore?
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Retail locations, some of their main ones, have been built and set up purposefully where these rail lines are located, right, to help with delivery of product. You have it as a main hub, and then you do use trucks locally to move and redistribute with other retail facilities. And so it really wouldn't be feasible to try to, build a whole brand new rail spur and connect with some other rail lines. I mean, could you do it? Probably, but look at all the headaches of permitting and getting things approved, and just the exorbitant costs. So it's not realistic. But retailers have tried to work with the railroads historically over the years to build these facilities where they have major hubs and storage, particularly for fertilizer, near these rail spurs. So that's why they're so vitally important part of our industry.
There's also the concern of on-time delivery. When you've got rail service, you can get more product in one shipment. But have you had problems getting that shipment on time?
We have, as I mentioned, this bunching issue, or where they have contracts with our members where they're supposed to get delivered, like let's say five cars of fertilizer, and the railroads will hold those back because of their scheduling, these precision scheduling, and then they'll wait till they have 20 cars to go to that site because of the volume, and then that site, you know, 2 weeks later will get 20 cars versus the 5 cars they were supposed to have already gotten and been able to deliver to their farmers. So that has occurred. We've testified before the Surface Transportation Board on that issue, and there's really no accountability on the railroad side because they have most of the cards, and there's minimal shippers' rights. And so we're trying to, during this whole process, depending on how it plays out, to increase and enhance shippers' rights so they're on the same level playing field with the railroads when you're trying to negotiate contracts.
Have your members also had difficulties with the railroads because a couple of them are foreign owned and they're just difficult to deal with?
Yeah, but the ownership necessarily has not come up. It's just the railroads in general, and it's across the board in various regions. So there's been challenges. So we've tried to stay engaged with our members to make sure, again, if any issue comes up, we raise those with the Surface Transportation Board. We try to work through those with the railroads themselves and as a mediator with our members. But during this whole process, ARA is here as a voice for the retail industry to stand up to these types of issues, because a lot of our members, or even the larger ones, but particularly the smaller family-owned ones or the farmer co-ops that are regional, they're worried about retribution potentially, right? If they get too vocal, they're working trying to get product delivery from these railroads, and who pay attention. And I'll just give you an example. Again, I've been in ARA for a long, long time. We had a member going back many farm bills ago testifying at an ag committee hearing. This is on farm bill or transportation supply chain issues, and there was one part of the testimony where there's a question about the railroads and services, and he gave an off-the-cuff answer, and then I think within an hour he's getting a call from his boss within his retail company that they at railroads had called them complaining about the testimony. So they're heavily active on Capitol Hill, and something that our members are kind of wary about being too public facing on, and so that's why ARA can take that position and strongly advocate on opposing this merger.
Do you believe that the Surface Transportation Board is hearing your concerns?
I do. There's been several stops through this process where they continue to ask for more information. They're saying, hey, UP, Norfolk Southern, you haven't provided all the data that's necessary for us to do our due diligence and analyze this. This latest, like a few weeks ago, I think, they've allowed for the process to move forward on this proposed merger, but they've taken a pause and abeyance until they get additional information from the railroads. So, and that's what they should be doing, right? They need to take a more deliberative approach, because the problem is if they went forward and approved this, it's hard to unwind. All the problems that have been raised from the ag sector, ARA, and others. If they approved it, if you look at other industries and mergers, it's hard to unwind those things once it's moved forward. So we think and appreciate them taking a deliberative approach and following the law about enhancing competition. So I think they do that. This should not be approved, but if they do, we're going to strongly push for, again, enhancing shippers' rights and more accountability related to services to make sure rural America and ag retail locations continue to be served in a timely way.
Of course, pushing for shippers' rights and backing, for instance, the Baldwin bill. Are there any other activities your organization is working on to perhaps improve the transportation for your members?
Yeah. Well, it's a multi-mode transportation for our members, whether it's by rail and this engagement. And again, we support the railroads. We want them to be successful economically, and we supported like tax credits and other things so they can invest in the railroads you talked about that they own, that they can have the financial ability to improve and enhance those services. but you also have a Congress trying to move a highway reauthorization bill to make sure we invest in our highway roads and bridges, because you have to move by truck as well, and also inland waterways. So there's will be an opportunity for Congress also to reauthorize what's called the Water Resource Development Act to reform the projects that are on inland waterways to make sure they remain efficient and do the dredging, because that's another vital part of our transportation system. So we're involved in all of that, including trying to increase the number of drivers through reforms like a seasonal ag CDL program that's in the House Highway Bill, the Build America 250 Act that Congressman Tracy Mann of Kansas has promoted, and we're trying to get similar language in the Senate bill that Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa has also kind of spearheaded that effort.
You mentioned the waterways and the effort to get the reauthorization there. Does your organization also support a proposal, I forget which legislator mentioned this a couple of years ago, that would one by one change all the locks to 1,200 foot from 600, starting at the lower end of the river, working its way up so you can move those barges faster?
No, that makes sense to me. Just in listening to that, we've been engaged in just general reforms. There are certain projects where there's been issues on like the Mississippi River or others, whether it's improving the locks and dams and the dredging because the waterways have gotten so low. So we've gotten involved in individual projects, but the making uniformity of the dam systems, we have not necessarily taken a specific view on that one. But again, before my time at ARA, this is how long I've been involved in waterway issues. I worked for a Georgia senator trying to rehabilitate these locks and dams, because if the general public may not be aware of it, but a lot of these were built back in the 40s, 50s, or earlier, so they're decades old, and they need tender loving care, as you'd say, and the investment to improve them and enhance them to make it even more efficient, like what you're talking about.
Is there anything you'd like to add today?
No, we've covered it a lot. It's just the one thing I'll say is, again, transportation and making sure the U.S. remains the most competitive transportation system so we can compete globally. You need that and need those investments, but you also need an active industry. And so I just encourage people, if they're not involved in ARA, to get involved or get involved in your state association at the local level, because all of these things, engagement makes a difference, because they're making decisions whether you're there or not, and whether you're educating them or not on the impact it has on your industry. So that's why on this rail merger, even if we have members or the non-members that aren't involved, they're going to get directly impacted by this one way or the other.
And if I understand correctly, right now there is no timeline or deadline for the Surface Transportation Board to decide on this merger.
Not yet. They've asked for that additional information that I said, so they've kind of paused it. I expect maybe later this summer, once that additional data has been provided that the Surface Transportation Board has requested, we'll probably get, or this fall, we'll probably get a better timeline, and I doubt any kind of decision wouldn't be made until next year, I would imagine.
Richard Gupton is Senior Vice President of Public Policy for the Ag Retailers Association. Thanks for being with us today on Brownfield.
Thank you. My pleasure.